Welcome to another episode of our Cornerstone lesson review. This week our lesson is entitled Reaching Toward Heaven, and our scripture story is taken from Genesis 11 verses 1 to 9. Our commentary this week is taken from the Patriarchs and Prophets, or the book beginning of the end, chapter 10. Our key text says, "Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth.'" Genesis 11, verse 4. The flashlight section of the lesson says, "There were some among them, however, who feared the Lord, but who had been deceived by the pretensions of the ungodly and drawn into their schemes. For the sake of these faithful ones, the Lord delayed his judgments and gave the people time to reveal their true character." Patriarchs and Prophets, page 123. What do you think? Do you ever try to be God? Complete the following statement with one or more statements from the list below. I play God when I 1. Tell on a friend who does something wrong. 2. Skip time alone with God. 3. Make important decisions after talking with friends. 4. Ask God to guide my future. 5. Eat healthy foods. 6. Don't listen to my parents. 7. Do my homework. Did you know? The people of Babel didn't just come up with the idea to build a tower on their own. No, they had an instigator. His name was Nimrod, ruler of the nation, and a man whom the Bible refers to as a mighty hunter. See Genesis 10 verses 8 to 10. The great historian Josephus wrote, "Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God." Into the story. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As the people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. Let's use brick instead of stone and tar for mortar." Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. Then the Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. And this is taken from Genesis chapter 11 verses 1 to 9. Out of the story. Who are the main actors in this story? What parts of the story are key to understanding it? Underline them. What aspects of the story are new to you? Place an arrow beside them. What emotions, actions, or adjectives enrich this story? Draw a rectangle around them. The builders of Babel had harnessed two of the greatest powers known to humans: effective communication and unity. Can you give any modern-day examples of groups that communicate effectively and are united in doing something wrong? To whom or what was the tower a monument? What types of monuments to themselves might people produce or create today? How do we know the difference between using the gifts God gives us as monuments to ourselves or monuments to God? See 1 Corinthians 13 verses 1 to 7. 1 Corinthians 13 verses 1 to 7. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that I can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all that I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. What are the two main lessons that you got from reading this story? Now for the punchlines. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. Psalm 127 verse 1. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. Psalm 34 verse 8. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. Proverbs 8 verse 34. Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Colossians 3 verse 1. Do your best to present yourselves to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly handles the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2 verse 15. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror. After looking at himself, goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. James chapter 1 verse 23 and 24. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. James 4 verse 17. Further insights. When Christ took human nature upon him, he bound humanity to himself by a tie of love that can never be broken by any power save the choice of man himself. And this is taken from Steps to Christ, page 73, as written by Ellen White. Now for the connecting to life or the daily sections of our lesson. Sabbath. Read Isaiah 14 verses 12 to 15. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphron. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. The What Do You Think section of this week's lesson challenged you to identify times in your life when you play God by the choices you make. In what ways were the builders of the Tower of Babel playing God? Explain. They were not the first beings to try to play God. Read Isaiah 14 verses 12 to 15. Then identify 3 actions and behaviors exhibited by Satan in his effort to kill God and take his throne. And here's a hint. Notice the number of I's in Satan's statements. Sunday. Read Psalm 127 verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. Read the Into the Story passage for this week. Toward the end of the passage, God is seen taking a very central role in the project undertaken by the builders. What was it that caught God's attention? Was God worried that the Babel builders were going to succeed in their act of defiance? What specifically moved him to confuse their ability to communicate? Monday. Read Genesis 11 verse 4. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Read the key text for this week's lesson again. Do you notice anything peculiar about how the people arrived at the idea to build a great city with a mega tower? Whom did they confer with about their plans? Do you ever launch out to do something great and forget to ask for God's input? The Bible says that they wanted to build a great city and erect a huge tower so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Genesis 11 verse 4. Great plans made without God are great plans doomed to failure. List 2 goals you hope to achieve in the future. Pause now and ask God to tell you if these are the right goals for you to pursue. Trust God to answer your requests. Watch for His response each day through His Word, other Christians, and circumstances. Tuesday. Read Matthew 27 verses 11 to 23. And this is about Jesus before Pilate. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. So, when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Jesus over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." In the flashlight section, Ellen White is quoted from the book Patriarchs and Prophets, in which she states that there were faithful believers among the rebellious and disobedient who were building the tower. Some who assembled to erect the tower were sincerely mistaken in what they were doing. In today's reading, who was being swept away in the tide of wrongdoing? What does Jesus' mock trial tell you about the dangers of following the crowd? If you could witness to a friend who is about to join a gang or follow the wrong crowd, what would you say to them? Wednesday. Read the scriptures in the punchline section. Psalm 34 verse 8, which says, encourage us to taste and see that the Lord is good. How can we taste God? Why does the psalmist David ask us to taste God first before seeing how good He is? Don't you like to see your food first before tasting it? If someone asks you to close your eyes before they feed you a piece of food, they are asking you to trust them. To experience God, we must trust Him and exercise faith in Him. Several texts in the punchline section deal with obedience to God's words. Choose one of these scriptures that specifically captured your attention. Explain what this scripture means to you. Thursday. Read James 4 verse 17. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. After reading about the Tower of Babel, list 2 ways in which the same attitude is seen in society today. For instance, people who store up huge amounts of money for themselves while other people who are in need perish. Now list 2 ways that you can care for those in need in your community, church, or school. Do one act of caring for someone today and say a prayer for that person. Friday. Read Colossians 3 verse 1. Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. By right, God could have destroyed the builders of Babel for disobeying His direct command to scatter throughout the earth and populate it. Instead, God simply confused their language and scattered them Himself, thereby allowing them another chance to obey Him. When was the last time that God gave you a second chance? Was it a test for which you failed to study? Did you somehow escape punishment for something wrong you did or something right you failed to do? Why not thank God right now for His grace towards you? Well, that brings us to the end of this week's lesson review. We look forward to seeing you in church on Sabbath and that lively discussion that we will have about this week's topic. Again, the reading for this week is taken from Patriarchs and Prophets, or the book Beginning of the End, chapter 10. God bless and see you in the next episode.